Welcome to another installment of the Parent Information Network. Today we are very, very happy to welcome Charita Stubbs, the head coach at the University of Arizona. And today she is going to be talking about Division I volleyball, the recruiting, the ins and outs, and all the things that go along with it. Charita was named a head coach last year. She spent 21 years coaching at the University of Arizona as an assistant coach. The last 2 years as the head coach. By the way, congratulations. She won the 2024 National Invitation Volleyball Championship this past season. Led the biggest turnaround in U of A history, winning 16 more matches than in last year. And as a player, was a all Pac-10 performer, back-to-back Sweet 16 berths, and played professionally in France. So, Charita, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And if you could maybe expound a little bit on your biography.
Thank you. Excited to be here. I love recruiting. I love educating parents on what it is that's necessary. I have a 16-year-old son who's going through the recruiting process in basketball, which is completely different and way more intense, I'd like to say. But nonetheless, the ins and outs of it is still the same, navigating the relationship between the coach and the athlete. Notice I said coach and athlete versus parent and athlete, but there is a role for parents as well. So anytime we get an opportunity to talk, I'm really excited to do that.
Excellent, excellent. So I guess the first thing is we'll start from the beginning. So describe the details of the current recruiting process in D1. When should a player start? How should they start? The best way to be seen, the most efficient way to get in front of you. Maybe describe that process in detail for the parents.
Well, you know, it sounds very intimidating, yet it sounds exciting because it is exciting. It's a time that I think every athlete should enjoy what they're doing and why they're doing it. It is a time, there is no right time versus a wrong time. But if I had to pinpoint one thing that becomes a deterrent in doing it too early is the athlete's not ready to present information to a coach. So what'll happen is someone will put a video together and they'll put it to music, which is highly unnecessary. They'll put it with stars and stripes and lines and circles to identify who the athlete is. That is not necessary either. So I say that to say recruiting services is not something you really need to invest in. If you have a phone, you can get your video put up on YouTube and you can provide that to the institution. That is all you need to do. But what happens is the athlete will put their video out there too soon, meaning they're not ready for a coach to see them. And so what we do when we get an email with an athlete saying, hey, take a look at me, you'll probably get about 1 minute of my time. If there's something that is of interest to me, you may get 1 minute and 30 seconds. But if in the first clip you say that you're a middle blocker and you open up with serving, there's a good chance that that video will not be looked at.
Wow. Okay. When's a good age to start this process, do you think?
A good age is, it varies for everyone. I'll say this, if you're really good at your skill, whatever your skill is, if you're a libero, good at passing, middle blocker, good at attacking, so forth and so on, then, you know, by your sophomore year, maybe. But if you're a late bloomer, maybe your junior year, the recruiting dynamics is, I know you're going to ask me that question later on, but the dynamics of recruiting is changing so much that, you know, you'll just go into a foul if you're a 2029 kid. You know, who knows what you're going to look like? Who knows what I'm going to need at that point in time? So a safe bet by, you know, the middle of your club season of your sophomore year.
Okay. What are the requirements necessary just to start the process? What are the requirements for Division I?
You know, a lot of people ask that question, and, you know, I'm going to have the honest and blunt information behind it. You meet the criteria. What is that? Big enough, strong enough, fast enough, athletic enough. And then, you know, let's say that you're a really skilled middle blocker who is 5'9". There is a place for you. It may not be at the Division I level because most Division I programs are looking for bigger middle blockers. That's just an example. If you are a setter who is, you know, smaller in stature, and you determine what small is to you, I just think at every level that varies. But let's say that you're a small setter. What are the chances that you can play in the front row and block someone at the net? If you can't get your hands over the net, then the chances of you getting a D1 scholarship to be a 5-1 setter are slim to none. So,
Okay.
it varies a lot for everyone. And then, they'll say, well, so-and-so school had this kid and she, she was small and she did it. Well, she could have been an exception to the rule. And, it's way more that don't meet the criteria versus those who can. But when you talk about a D1 athlete, they tend to have the right size, the right athleticism, meaning jump. They have good hand-eye coordination. And then, everything else becomes something that you can work with. We often hear you can't coach height. It's a true statement. So if you tend to be a little bit bigger, you may get a look a little bit faster.
Gotcha. What about scholastically? What about school-wise grades, things like that?
Well, if you'd asked me this question 5 years ago, my answer would be a little bit different than my answer is now. Because of the way scholarships are being broken up, and if the House settlement goes through, which we're still waiting to hear the information on that, if it goes through, then the dynamics of a scholarship will look a little bit different for every institution that's in the Power Four.
Okay.
Meaning you can receive an athletic scholarship or you can receive some money towards your scholarship. Whereas before we were limited with just 12 scholarships in Division I, meaning you would have your tuition, room, board, cost of attendance, all in one lump sum. Now, if the House settlement goes through, we can break it up. So what does that mean? The high academic student may go to a university, let's say the school costs $50,000, that's just a random number I put out there, per year, but they receive $30,000 in academic aid. They're only needing $20,000, and then they're on a full scholarship, which is what is very common in Division II, that they can break their scholarships up. That was not the case, but if the House settlement goes through, that'll be the case for us as well.
And when do we know about that House settlement?
They're supposed to make a final decision in April. We'll see. I mean, it's been talked about, and most Power Fives, if not all, are making plans for it to go through, just because
Gotcha.
you have to prepare for it.
And just for the parents, when you talk about Power Fours and Power Fives, what are you speaking of?
I'm speaking of schools that are in the SEC, ACC, Big 10, and Big 12.
Okay, the big conferences basically. And
Correct.
You guys are in the
Big 12.
Big 12 as of last year or so. Okay.
Correct.
What are the characteristics of the athletes that you're looking at and the athletes that you've seen succeed at the D1 level? Like, what are you looking at in your recruits when you go to a club tournament? Is there certain things that you look at and think, oh, this is great, or wow, I'm not going to touch that kid with a 10-foot pole? Like, what are those kind of dynamics?
I laugh at that one because no matter where we go, that is a common question, because everyone's going to tell you that their kid is the best. Everyone's going to tell you that, my kid works hard, and everyone's going to tell you that their kid is a pleaser. I think that is true about 50% of the time. Parents tend to look through things with, my kid is just awesome. They do everything. No. And when I hear that, I always take a step back and go, really? Which is why we tend to talk to club coaches. We talk to high school coaches. We talk to high school teachers. They tend to know the athlete a little bit more because they see them more often throughout the day. So every school is a little bit different. But a couple things that you commonly want. I don't know a program who doesn't want a competitor. A competitor meaning someone that is taking the task that is put before them and going after it with everything they have. A competitor knows what the score is at all time. The competitor tends to jump higher when it is necessary. They talk more aggressively as the score gets closer. They're willing to put a team on their back and carry the team. And that's where that physicality comes into play that we talked about in terms of being an athlete. So you could want to be great all you want, but it doesn't mean that it's going to happen, because you can't do what you can't do. So let's take that small athlete again that wants to play Division I, and she's a setter, and she wants to play in the front row, but she can't get her hands above the net. You can want all you want, but physically it's just not going to happen. So understanding that and maybe embracing different aspects of the game, which puts them in a different category, because that competitive nature is not something that is within everyone. The other thing that all coaches want now, and I've feel very confident in saying this, is someone that is accountable. There's so many things that are going on in the day in life of a Division I athlete that everyone goes, oh, I just want to do it because it looks like fun. Well, that's because you just see the competition days. You don't see the rigors of every day getting up first thing in the morning, going to practice, getting your, fueling in, which is a requirement as well, is making sure you eat properly and take care of your body. And then going off and getting ready for classes, going to class all day, and then going over to study hall to get academic things taken care of, and then doing some type of HAB, be it rehab, post-HAB, or preventative HAB. So, you're constantly going, and then, you want to get involved in the community. And then you talk about that beast called the NIL, which is out there. And so you're constantly being pulled in different directions, and you have to be accountable to take care of it, because no one area can slack off. And, and because of the way scholarships potentially can go with the House ruling, you could lose your scholarship because academically you didn't do what you needed to do. Whereas before, maybe the program will work with you a little bit more. Or you're that kid who's constantly injured, and it's like, okay, is it worth the investment if they can't make it through a season because they're not accountable to do their rehab, prehab, or post-hab?
Yeah. You kind of just led into my next question, because I think a lot of parents think, oh, my daughter will have fun at volleyball season, and that's pretty much going to be it. And it really is, I think, and you can correct me if you think this is an incorrect statement. It's a full-time job. It's literally a year-round full-time job. Can you kind of just, like you said, you kind of gave an idea of a normal day during the season, but maybe on a season yearly basis, like during the season, obviously they're playing, practices, rehab and post-hab, all that good stuff. But then when the season's over, there's still a lot to do the entire school year, right? Can you go through that a little bit?
Yes, and so basically the NCAA mandates the number of hours that we can work with the athlete. And I'll start now because it is the spring. From January, roughly you're talking about 8 weeks that you're in an 8-hour-a-week period, which means you can do no more than 8 hours with your sport. That could be lifting weights in the gym sessions, and those two components. That's essentially what your car hours are, which are 8 hours. But then you have all the other things that need to take place. What you'll commonly hear is that if you're doing everything that we ask you to do within those 8 hours, you're still not good enough, which means you have to put in more work on your own. There's, that's the prehab, post-hab, rehab, that's extra hours in the gym. I sit back and I look at our men's basketball team, for example, and they're always in there getting extra shots up, working with their managers and things of that nature. That has bled over into many other sports because you have to be good at it, and that becomes one job. And then you have the job of your academics, which, depending on how good you are in school academically, you may need to put in, for a class that is a 1-hour class, you may have to put in 10 hours a week just to be able to sustain and maintain where you are in that academically. That means meeting with tutors, that means meeting with learning specialists, that means meeting with your academic counselor, whatever your learning rate is. So, you'll go through those 8-hour-a-week period for about 6 to 8 weeks. I should probably know that number, but I really don't, but it's 6 to 8 weeks of that. And then you go into what we call our 20-hour-a-week period, which is essentially the amount of time that we have throughout the fall, and that's August to December, as long as you're still competing. And that means we have 20 hours a week to make sure that we are doing what we need to do, which you can have no more than 4 hours in a day. The NCAA mandated probably many years ago, where during the 20-hour-a-week period, you have to have one mandated day off that is not your travel day. So I'll go to 20 hours, then I'll go back to the 8 hours. So you would practice, Wednesday, Friday is what we were this year, conference. We pretty much played on Wednesday and Friday. So you practice Monday, Tuesday, travel on Tuesday, play on Wednesday, travel if necessary on Thursday, unless you're in a place where you can stay and go. But, travel, practice on Thursday, play on Friday, travel home on Saturday, and Sunday's your day off. And then you start the rat race over. If you were a Friday, Sunday conference, which we were in the Pac-12, then Mondays were typically the day off because we would travel back home on Sunday after competing. So every conference is a little bit different. And then in the 8-hour week period, you have to give 2 days off. So because we don't travel during the 8-hour week period, we typically will practice 4 days of the week, Monday through Friday. But I could go 5, but with 8 hours is really difficult to do that. So you'll typically have your Saturday and Sunday off.
Gotcha. Wow, that's just exhausting. Listen to you talk about it. Holy cow. There is, to say the least, a lot going on with Division I athletics and Division I volleyball at the moment. We got the transfer portal. You were talking about NIL before. Can you talk to parents a little bit about what NIL is and how it's affecting the game, and then maybe also talk about the transfer portal as well, and how that's affecting the game a little bit?
Yes, so NIL is name, image, and likeness. And so basically that means I can use my beautiful face to go out and make monetary gains from it, or get in-kind gifts, hair, nails, things of that nature. Whereas prior to the inception of NIL, you could not do that. You were mandated through the NCAA that you couldn't do it. And so there was a lawsuit, and of course, the athletes won. I think they should. I think I should be able to capitalize on who I am. And so you basically can be paid to do different services. The different services could be anything. It could be posting, it could be in videos, it could be doing lessons, it could be going to a birthday party. I mean, things of that nature. It could be just pretty much anything, but it has to go through a process. You can't just say, oh, give me $10,000 and now in the name of NIL, I get to keep it. There is a checks and balances that take place with it. The problem, if you will, with the NIL is the athlete still needs to do work for it. And so a lot of people will see, and parents will see, oh, my son's friend got, $50,000 for this, or, some volleyball player got $100,000 and basketball is getting $1 million. You'll hear all these numbers and whatnot. And in some cases it's true, but most often it is not true. It is slightly exaggerated, because no one's going to tell you that I really only got $500. But there is someone out there that actually knows the amount. The problem that I personally see with it is that it is such a beast with 18, 19, 20-year-old. You look at the number of professional athletes that are bankrupt after 3 years, and they have nothing to show for it. And so I just want it to be a process where the athletes are being educated on it. And so the Power 4 schools are doing a phenomenal job of going out and sharing information and talking about how you have to pay taxes and holding a certain percentage out, and understanding if you're going to still be claimed by your parent, which then at that, because most kids are still at that age, the parents will go into a totally different tax bracket, which they don't necessarily know. And then if they have the athlete be on their own, did they start a nonprofit, which is probably what they should do. I mean, LLC, sorry, not a nonprofit, but an LLC. They should, start that. There's just different legs to it. But what I can tell you for sure is it doesn't come as easy as it may seem. It'll be like that one person you see that, says, oh, all I did was drink grapefruit juice every day and I lost 30 pounds. And then everyone thinks, oh, I can just drink grapefruit juice and I'll lose 30 pounds. It doesn't work like that. Maybe 1, 2, 4 kids max. And then the next formula is grapefruit juice plus working out. Then the next one is grapefruit juice plus working out plus sleeping 12 hours a day. So everyone's formula is a little bit different. But I think it's exciting that individuals can capitalize on that part of them. In regards to the transfer portal, unfortunately, tend to work a little hand in hand, because athletes have been known and are known to now transfer because they can go to a school with promises of making more, or some. In some cases, a lot of people don't even use NIL yet, but having the opportunity to make money through NIL. So the transfer portal means the athlete can be at school A, and after their first semester decide they don't like it. They then decide to go into the transfer portal. They go into their compliance office and say, I would like to transfer. Within 48 hours, the compliance office is mandated to put the athlete in the portal, which then allows other institutions to go into the NCAA portal system that we find online, and you see that athlete, and now everyone has fair game to reach out to that athlete. The athlete does not need to let the coach know, which I do not agree with. I think that if you're going to leave, you need to go up to the coach and tell them you're going to leave. And honestly, I think you should kind of tell why too, because you've spent time with a relationship and getting to know them. So that gives the athlete to do that. So then the athlete decides to transfer to school B. Well, after a year and a half, athlete decides, I don't like that school either. So I'm going to put myself in the portal. They can then go to school C. They can say, hey, I don't like school C. Then they can go to school D. So there's not a lot of mandated loyalty now, and which means as a college coach, I am constantly recruiting. I'm recruiting my current student athletes, meaning the ones in my program, looking to recruit those that are out there, looking to recruit those that are in high school. And it just means that the job never ends.
Yeah. Did you, going back to the NIL for a second, do you have any idea what percent of female Division I players get NIL deals? Is it 1 out of 10? Is it 2 out of 10? Is it 1 out of 30? Is it, I know schools are all over the country, so there's 335, institutions, but I'm just curious if you have an idea, because again, I think parents have this idea that, oh, my daughter's beautiful, and of course she'll be able to, grab an extra 100K on the side and sell cars and things like that. So do you have any idea?
I don't know. And, they're still doing studies on it, but I would think on average, maybe 60, 70% of a team receives some form of NIL. And that could be like you'll see a lot of athletes getting liquid IV. You'll see that, someone will reach out and say, hey, market this. And that just means they get free liquid IV. Very rarely is it just monetary. But in some cases, different institutions will have someone on staff now, because our process is in-house. And, so everything is kind of mandated through us, which is really nice. But what I would tell a family, if they are interested in getting their child invested in, work with NILs, is to start it now prior to going to college. So for example, you can reach out to your local fill in the blank and say, my kid plays volleyball and she would like to market your sport. And then they can kind of get the ball rolling with it. Because what I found in my own generic study is that most of the student athletes that are doing well with their NILs, they started it in high school. They didn't wait till they got to college. Wow. Okay. To have it start working for them. And that's in terms of an ongoing process.
Gotcha. Okay. And then just to go back to the transfer portal for a second, there's some good and some bad for it. The good, of course, is that if a player is in a bad situation with a coach, or with a not a good coach, or maybe the team, they just don't get along or something, she has an option to get out. The flip side, of course, though, is that you have players who think they should be playing more, aren't playing more, and saying, okay, forget this, I'm out, I'm going to go somewhere else. And I've heard numbers in the past that, once the transfer portal, everybody's kind of filled their teams, there's still, almost half the kids are still in the portal, and they don't wind up getting a spot. Is that close to what you've seen or heard?
100% true. The grass is not always greener on the other side. And, so what happens, and I actually educated our athletes on this. So what happens when your name goes into the portal? If a kid from my program goes in, I can't see their name in the portal. But what happens is it is a list that goes like this. And so when I join, the list moves down. When you join, the list moves down. And so unless someone knows that, one, you're in the portal, how would they know you're in the portal? If they don't know, and it's not in the portal in terms of your position, your height, your academics, your years of eligibility left, none of that information is provided. It is your name, your school, and whether you want to be contacted. And then it's kind of like, how do you want to be contacted? Is there a phone number, or is there an email, things of that nature? So it's not something that every program has the personnel to go through the list on a daily basis. If you're a graduate student, you can enter your name at any point. If you are non-graduate, then there are certain times of the year that you can actually enter. There's a block of time in December, and then there's a block of time in the month of May. And then, you just have that window to go in. And if nothing happens during that window, essentially you just sit around and wait. But you can reach out to schools and say, hey, my name is Rita Stubbs. I'm a middle blocker at the University of Arizona, and I'm in the portal. And then depending on the needs of a program, they will pursue that more. But because the list constantly moves down, there could be a kid that went in the portal back in December when the portal first opened that's still there because lo and behold, her name just moved all the way down the list because 500 kids went in the portal up until the last date in January.
Wow. Wow. I just, it's from one coach to another, I can't even imagine what you must juggle during that time. That's got to be insane for you. Just insane.
It's definitely stressful. It's one of those things where you always got your phone in your hand. Oh, hey, you okay? Everything all right? Okay, good. I'm in the middle of a meeting. I'll call you back. It's one of those things. You don't get to just leave it there and talk about it later.
Yeah.
And it's the nature of the beast. And do I like it? I have a love-hate relationship. We've definitely benefited from some kids in the portal. But what you'll see a lot of is more often than not, you'll see a lot of freshmen go in. I'm like, oh, did you give it enough time? And I think kids are making decisions without really investing and looking at the school to see how this is going to work for me. What is the dynamics of it? And then, this past cycle, you'll see a fair number of students that went in that played. Team went to the tournament, team went deep in the tournament, and they still transferred.
Yeah. So is part of that, do you think, especially on the freshman side, because they didn't do their homework going into the program, they just saw, oh, a Division I offer, I'm going to take it and go, and they didn't really do their homework very much? Is that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that's a blanket across the board, but more often than not, it's like the first school to talk to me. Oh, well, I didn't know that they had 4 other outside hitters and I was just going to be the 5th one. I didn't know that. I don't like it. Or, they promised me I was going to be able to play X number of time and I didn't work out to the level that they thought. And so they now didn't play me as much. Now I want to go. But there's a ton of reasons why an athlete leaves, but I just can tell you that back in the day, you would go to your school and it was common that you did not play your freshman year. You kind of, fought and worked your way out. But now I like to say that you have 4 months to prove to an athlete that, you're for them and they're for you. And sometimes, we're okay if a kid leaves too. It can work in both directions.
Yeah.
But, if a kid tends to transfer or move a lot in club, that's an indicator that they can move a lot in college too. So
Yeah.
it makes false.
Again, that leads nicely into my next question. What advice would you have for parents or kids entering this process at 14, 15, 16, maybe even 17 years old, from both a volleyball, a scholastic, and maybe even an emotional point of view?
I would say from an academic perspective, do your work, go to class, take math all 4 years, invest in your English, and make sure that your grades are important. The way the recruiting process is going, if both kids are the same, one is academically better than the other, we're going to go with the more academic person because we don't have to worry about when they get here. Remember, I go back to that accountability piece. Why aren't you accountable in high school? And what makes me think you're going to all of a sudden become accountable in college? With more demands and rigors and things of that nature. When I think about from a physical standpoint, play as much as possible. The younger you are, the more you need to do all parts of volleyball. Because unless, your dad is 6'10" and your mom is 6'5", you never know how tall you're going to be. So to specialize too young and not work on a skill because this is where I'm good and this is where I think I belong isn't necessarily the case. And then from just the mental standpoint of things, I would say enjoy the process, and there's no time limit on when you need to make a decision. It just needs to be after you graduate high school, before school starts. So if you get the school of your choice in the month of June of your senior year, it's no different than you get in the school of your choice, which you think is your choice in your sophomore year, and luckily you can't even make a decision your sophomore year anymore. But in your mind, in your heart, I would say take a look at the big picture of schools that are out there. We all offer something different. Not every athlete is for every school, and every school is surely not for every athlete.
Gotcha. That's nice. That's good advice. Tell me, just wrapping up here, give me 3, 4, maybe 5 big rocks that parents should take away from what we've talked about in the last 30 or 40 minutes?
Parents, do not live through your children. Let them enjoy their process. What you had is what you had, whether it was good or bad. Be realistic in where your child is. I would say get with your club director and kind of talk through it and understand what is going on, because everyone's process is going to be different. There may be a kid that everyone wants on June 15th. Hey, we want you to come to camp. We want to offer you a scholarship of going into their junior year, whereas another kid may not get that opportunity until their senior year. It does not devalue who you are as a parent or as an athlete. Do not spend a lot of money on those recruiting services. I'm telling you right now, I mean, just in the time that I've sat here and talked with you all, I received 30 emails. I can see it because it's right in front of me on my screen. And what happens is it happens right before a weekend during, the recruiting season. I'll get all these emails. Oh, come watch me play. Well, who are you? I've never heard of you. I've never seen you. And it's always, I am good for you. Really? You don't know who I am. You don't know what I need. You don't know what I'm about. So you refrain from saying you are good for the school. Let the school determine if you're good enough for them and let the relationship flourish. Once you get to the point of communicating with the school, continue to communicate. You don't want it to be one-sided. And so I like to tell parents all the time, remember when you were dating your significant other, if you called all the time and they never called you, what did you think? If they call you all the time and you didn't respond, what did they think? So the relationship needs to be mutual. The other thing I would share is to keep grinding. At the end of the day, the better you are at this, your trait, your skill, the more you're going to be wanted. And then the last one is, I would say this for the parents, allow your athlete to do the work themselves. If they want it, let them do it. That's not to say you don't proofread. It doesn't say that you don't every now and again go, hey, did you send anything out? But we know when you're the person sending information to us. I know the difference between ChatGPT and a 16-year-old child. Just want you to know, we know this.
Gotcha. Well, Charita, I can't thank you enough for your time and your insight and your information. It was excellent. I'm sure the parents got a lot out of this. Best of luck next season. And if the parents wanted to get in touch with you and had a question for you, maybe on recruiting, can you share your email address with them and maybe they can just shoot you an email with questions?
Yes, assuming they're the right age, I can respond. If they are not, I cannot respond. So it has to be after June 15th of their sophomore year that I can actually respond in terms of giving information. But my email is cmj@arizona.edu. That's cmj@arizona.edu.
Charita, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated. And we look forward to seeing you guys on the court next season.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye-bye.